All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully you're here for the information session for the draft Michigan Environmental Justice Screening Tool, or MiEJScreen, which you will hear us mention pretty consistently throughout the evening. So we had a really great conversation earlier today at our first session, and I know we're going to have another great conversation tonight. So I'm really excited. The team that's here today with me is really excited to finally be launching this tool and opening up the public comment period. So we're very thankful that you all decided to come join us tonight. So without further ado, we're going to get to actually talking about stuff. So first of all, for those who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Dixon, and I work in EGLE's Environmental Support Division. So I work as the air quality liaison. If you've come to any air quality permit meetings or any public comment meetings, things like that, you probably would have seen me. And for those of you who haven't, nice to meet you. I also have my co-host here, Anita Singh. Anita, I don't know if you want to turn your camera on really quick just to wave to the people. She's going to be helping me in the background with questions and answers and things like that, and making sure that things don't fall apart here. I also have with me today Katie Lambeth, and she works of Environmental Justice Public Advocate. She's going to be talking a lot about the background and formulation of the tool tonight, and some other things as well. And then we're really also lucky to have John Esch here with us. He did a lot of the work on creating the tool and the GIS functionality of it. So very excited to have this team to talk with you today. Just want to kind of go through the agenda, talk a little bit about how things are going to work. So I'm going to go over some housekeeping stuff in just a minute, but then when I pass it over to Katie, she's going to be talking to you about the background of the tool. So how did this kind of come to be? How did we get here? What's in the tool? Talk about the different layers, the different indicators, those environmental indicators and the socioeconomic indicators, all the kind of data that makes up the tool and makes it be what it is. She'll be talking through the scoring, which is also really interesting, something a little bit different. And then we're going to be going through sort of a tool demonstration. So John's going to walk us through the tool. He's going to show you a lot of the functionality. So if this is your first time ever working in a screening tool like this, if you haven't poked around an EPA screening tool, it might look kind of foreign to you, which is great. So we're going to go through how the tool itself functions, what the buttons are for, what you can get from it. It's going to be a lot, but hopefully it gives you enough of a basis to go in and poke around and find some holes and ask some questions and make some suggestions to us. That's kind of the point of these initial meetings that we're having. So just to talk a little bit more about that. So once we get through the demonstration, we are going to be having a question and answer session. So I'll talk to you in just a second about the best way to ask your questions. But we're obviously here for that back and forth conversation. So we're hoping folks will have some good questions on the information that we present. We're going to be talking about how you can provide comments to us. So because this isn't, a permit comment period and, about the screening tool, really open to all different kinds of comments. Are there other data sets that we should be considering? Is there different ways you would like to see the data? Are things not working like you thought they were? Do you need further instructions? So we're really hoping to get a lot of great comments throughout this 60-day comment period. So, and just to remind you, it does close on May 16th. So you got quite a while yet. So if this is your first time looking at it, first time learning about it, you've got a lot of time to poke around and come back to talk to us. We're going to be having a couple of office hours sessions, which we'll go over a little bit more. I'll mention those again later as well. But that's going to be opportunities where you can come visit us at lunchtime, ask us some questions like, how do you do this? How does this work? Or I haven't been able to make it do this. What am I doing wrong? That kind of thing. And then we are going to be another information session similar to this, but maybe a little bit different. And that one will close with a public hearing where we'll take comments on the record. So we're not going to be taking comments tonight because we want you to just get a good feel for the tool itself, but we will be taking comments there at the end of April. So we'll give you more information about that as we go through the night. We're also going to be talking about where you can find more information because we've got a lot of good supporting documentation, which might help you walk through the tool a little bit better or understand some of the capabilities. And then we'll be talking to you at the very end who you can contact if you have other questions. So a couple of things before we get started, just related to housekeeping, is during the actual presentation today, your lines are going to be muted, and we are recording this. So what we're going to do with the recordings is we will post them online. We're going to post them on EGLE's YouTube channel, and then we're going to link to them through the environmental justice webpage, which is just michigan.gov/environmental justice, all one word. Might be interesting if you are really into this to revisit maybe the last half hour or so of the first session we did today. That's where we had the question and answer. So just to see what kinds of questions were asked and answered during that session might be helpful as well. So we're hoping to get those posted hopefully by Thursday. So as we go through the night and you're listening, go ahead and type your questions into the question and answer box. I find that works personally best for me, but some people might feel very passionate about asking their questions aloud, and that's also perfectly fine. So if you're joining us online, you can just click that raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen when we get to the Q&A session of the night. Or if you're calling in, you can just press #2 on your phone. So I'll remind you of this a little bit later as well, but I know you guys don't want to really hear me talk about logistics, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Katie, and she can get us into some of the details about the tool itself. So Katie, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Katie Lambeth. I'm EGLE's Environmental Justice and Tribal Liaison. And to start today's presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about environmental justice in Michigan to set the stage. Integrating equity and environmental justice into state government is vital for the state of Michigan. Governor Whitmer's Executive Order 2019-06 created the Office of Environmental Justice Public Advocate, as well as the Interagency Environmental Justice Response Team within EGLE, with the goal of ensuring all Michigan residents benefit from the same protections from environmental hazards and to work to achieve Michigan's goal of becoming a national leader in achieving environmental justice. The role of Environmental Justice Public Advocate was created to lead the office, and the office was created as a Type 1 agency within EGLE with a direct line to the governor's office. Many of you know Regina Strong, who is EGLE's Environmental Justice Public Advocate. The executive order specifically mentioned several state departments to be included in the environmental justice response team, including the departments of Agriculture and Rural Development, Civil Rights, Health and Human Services, Natural Resources, Transportation, the Michigan Strategic Fund, and the Public Service Commission. Since that time, we've invited every state agency to the table to provide a comprehensive picture of programs and policies affecting environmental justice communities. So here you can see the organizational structure of the office and the response team. And as you can see on the bottom here, 4 work groups were formed to help achieve the priorities of both the office and the response team. The 4 work groups were formed with representation from departments on the response team and include communications and outreach, planning and policy, training, and research and data. The primary objective of the research and data work group was to develop the Michigan Environmental Justice Mapping and Screening Tool, or MiEJScreen, which is what we're here today to talk about. Michigan also has an advisory council on environmental justice, which I'll talk about next. So as part of the state's environmental justice work, the state's first Environmental Justice Advisory Council, or as we call it, the MiEJ, was formed on January 23rd, 2020. The MiEJ is an advisory board for environmental justice actions spearheaded by both the response team and the office. And members represent an intentional combination of frontline activists, advocacy organizations, academia, tribal representation, local governments, business and industry, public health, and labor. This picture is from the first joint meeting between the MiEJ and the Interagency Response Team. Michigan defines environmental justice as the equitable treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, ability, or income, and is critical to the development and application of laws, regulations, and policies that affect the environment. as well as the places people live, work, play, worship, and learn. So when we talk about equitable treatment, we mean that no group of people bears a disproportionate share of the negative consequences resulting from operations and policies, that all people benefit from the application of laws and regulations, and that eliminating barriers and repairing systemic injustices, that word always gets me. Meaningful involvement means that people have an opportunity to participate in decisions. Decision makers seek out and facilitate that involvement. People's concerns are considered in the decision, and that people can influence state agency decisions. Now I'm going to transition in talking about background on the development of the tool. In 2017, Governor Snyder created the Environmental Justice Work Group following direct recommendations from the Flint Water Advisory Task Force. The work group was charged with developing recommendations to improve environmental justice awareness and engagement. The work group developed a set of 33 recommendations, including a recommendation to develop an environmental justice screening tool in Michigan and include cumulative impacts in the decision-making process. These recommendations also informed the creation of the Office of Environmental Justice Public Advocate and the Interagency Environmental Justice Response Team. Both the office and the response team identified this as a priority, and the data and research work group that I mentioned previously began meeting in December of 2019. 2 research projects conducted by graduate students from the University of Michigan under the advisement of Dr. Paul Mohai contributed to the tool's development as well by examining the feasibility of creating a Michigan-specific screening tool and providing recommendations on best practices for the development of the screening tool in Michigan. Both of those reports are listed on the screen if you're interested in checking them out. So the development of the draft tool has occurred over the past 2 years, so we're very excited to get this out. As I mentioned, MiEJScreen was developed through collaboration with several state agencies through our environmental justice response team and evaluation of environmental justice mapping tools, including California's EnviroScreen and the United States Environmental Protection Agency's EGLE and similar tools from other states and municipalities. During the development, the office sought input from various stakeholders, including the MiEJ and the 102 participants and 8 regional roundtables held across the state in April and May of 2021. The draft tool has also been released for a 60-day public comment period, as Jennifer mentioned. The primary purpose of MiEJScreen is to examine and map environmental, health, and socioeconomic indicators to identify communities in Michigan that may be disproportionately impacted by environmental hazards. While the full uses and purposes of the tool will be developed over time, other environmental justice mapping tools have been used to prioritize resource allocation, identify areas for additional outreach, guide policy decisions, and prioritize programs such as redevelopment and enforcement. MiEJScreen is designed to be used by multiple stakeholders. Now I'll transition into talking about the methodology, scoring, and indicators used in MiEJScreen. I apologize in advance, some of this is a little bit technical, but I think it's important to discuss. So if you want more in-depth information on any of this, please refer to the draft MiEJScreen technical report, and we'll show you how to access that report later in the presentation. The methodology used for MiEJScreen is based on California's EnviroScreen, which is a screening tool that evaluates the burden of pollution from multiple sources while accounting for potential vulnerability to the adverse effects of pollution. So there are essentially 2 sides to the equation: burden and vulnerability. Similar to EnviroScreen, MiEJScreen is based on potential exposures to pollutants, environmental conditions, socioeconomic factors, and the prevalence of certain health conditions to produce scores for every census tract in the state. In the next slide, I'll talk about what a census tract is and why we chose to use census tracts. The scores are mapped so that different communities can be compared. An area with a high score is one that experiences more impacts than areas with low scores. We use percentile ranking in order to compare scores for each census tract, which I will talk more about in a couple slides. MiEJScreen ranks communities based on data that are available from state and federal sources. And the indicators were selected based on the availability of national or statewide data that could be incorporated in the tool at the appropriate geographic scale. Therefore, we were limited in the data that we could include in the tool, and we recognize that MiEJScreen does not include every environmental or health impact communities are facing. Census tracts are small, relatively permanent subdivisions of a county designated by the United States Census Bureau. Census tract boundaries are determined with the goal of being maintained over a long time so that statistical comparisons can be made over time. Therefore, data is often readily available at this geographic scale. Census tracts range in size but have an average population of 4,000 people. Census tracts are used to represent the locations of communities across Michigan. In Michigan, there's 2,767 census tracts. As you can see in the image, because census tracts are population-based, the area range in sizes. So as I mentioned previously, for the MiEJScreen overall score, each census tract is given a percentile ranked based on how the overall score for the census tract compares to other census tracts in Michigan. This image shows how the overall score is displayed on the map. Each of these color bins represents 10% of census tracts, with the 90th to 100th percentiles being the highest scores and the 0 to 10th percentiles being the lowest scores. As I mentioned previously, Michigan has 2,767 census tracts, so each color bin represents approximately 276 tracts. As an example, as you can see with this highlighted census tract, it has an overall score that falls in the 25th percentile, which is represented on the map in the blue shaded color bin for the 20th to 30th percentile. When comparing this census tract to the rest of the state, 75% of census tracts in Michigan have a higher score, while 24% have a lower score. Now I'm going to talk about how the MiEJScreen overall score is calculated. The MiEJScreen overall score is made up of two subscores: environmental conditions and population characteristics. These two subscores are further divided into 4 categories. There are 2 categories representing environmental conditions, that is environmental exposures and environmental effects, and 2 categories representing population characteristics, this being sensitive populations and socioeconomic factors. Each of the categories has a set of indicators, which I'll talk more in depth about in a few minutes. An indicator is a measure of either environmental conditions representing pollution burden or health or vulnerability factors for population characteristics. The individual indicators are scored for each census tract by its raw value, then assigned percentiles based on rank order. Those percentile scores are averaged for each of the 4 categories. So for environmental exposures, environmental effects, sensitive populations, and socioeconomic factors. To generate the subscore, the average percentile scores for the respective categories were added together and averaged. Please note the environmental effects indicators were weighted half the environmental exposure indicators because they only represent potential exposure. The environmental conditions and population characteristic scores were then scaled and assigned a value between 0 and 10. The scaling ensures that the environmental conditions and population characteristic subscores contribute equally to the overall MiEJScreen score. The overall MiEJScreen score is calculated by multiplying the subscores. Since each group has a maximum score of 10, the maximum MiEJScreen score is 100. Census tracts are then ordered from highest to lowest based on their overall score. A percentile for the overall score is then calculated from the ordered values. As I showed you in the previous slide, the tool maps the cumulative overall MiEJScreen score for every census tract in the state in percentile rank. The user can also see the subscores, the categories, and each of the 26 individual indicator scores in percentiles using the tool. John will show you how to do this when he goes through the tool demonstration. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the indicators that are included in the categories. Exposure indicators are based on measurements of different types of pollution that people may come into contact with. Most of these are air quality related issues. Inhaling, ingesting, or otherwise interacting with the substances generated or described by some of the indicators in this category have been associated with poor health outcomes. For example, exposure to high levels of ambient ozone have been associated with reductions in lung functioning. The National Scale Air Toxics Assessment, or NATA, Air Toxics Cancer Risk Indicator, measures the lifetime cancer risk from inhalation, or breathing it in, of air toxics. Air toxics, often referred to as hazardous air pollutants, are pollutants that are known or suspected to cause cancer or other serious health effects. This indicator comes from EPA's MiEJScreen and uses the most recent data from EPA's NATA. NATA estimates cancer risk and non-cancer risk of 187 air pollutants classified as hazardous air pollutants. The same information is used for the next two indicators. The NATA Respiratory Hazard Index measures the ratio of exposure concentration to health-based reference concentration. The NATA Diesel Particulate Matter measures diesel particulate matter levels in the outdoor air as micrograms per cubic meter of air. Particulate matter is a measurement of particulate matter that is 2.5 microns or smaller in size, levels in the outdoor air as an annual average. This indicator comes from EPA's MiEJScreen. This is the same as with the next indicator, ozone, which is a measurement of the summer seasonal average of daily maximum 8-hour concentration in the outdoor air in parts per billion. The last indicator measures traffic density within 150 meters of a census tract that is normalized by vehicles per day divided by the adjusted road length in miles. This indicator comes from the Michigan Department of Transportation. Environmental effect indicators generally show proximity to known or potential contamination sites. As I mentioned previously, because the environmental effects indicator represents only proximity to potential exposure rather than true exposure, this category is weighed by half its total when factored into the MiEJScreen score to better reflect the risk to nearby communities. Living in proximity to environmental degradation, such as impaired water bodies or cleanup sites, as this category represents, can affect the health of communities in several ways. Several of the indicators included in this category have been associated with the prevalence of diseases ranging from cardiovascular to reproductive. Additionally, living in environmentally degraded communities can cause members to feel stressed and unsafe, both of which are risks to human health. Poor environmental quality may also prevent community members from enjoying or utilizing their environment, including those that are associated with health benefits such as outdoor recreation. Proximity to cleanup sites is the proximity to cleanup sites regulated under Part 201 of Michigan's Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, sites regulated under Part 213, leaking underground storage tank sites, and Superfund sites, which are sites on the Environmental Protection Agency's national priority list. This data comes from EGLE's Remediation and Redevelopment Division and EPA. Proximity to hazardous waste facilities measures proximity to hazardous waste facilities, including treatment, storage, and disposal facilities, and large quantity generators. This data comes from EPA's MiEJScreen and EGLE's Material Management Division. Impaired water bodies measures the sum number of pollutants across all water bodies designated as impaired within the area. This data comes from EGLE's Water Resource Division's list of Great Lakes, inland lakes, wetlands, streams, and rivers that are listed impaired under Section 303D of the Federal Clean Water Act. Proximity to solid waste sites and facilities measures proximity to regulated licensed landfills, old dump sites, and scrap tire sites. This data comes from EGLE's Material Management Division. The lead paint indicator is the percent of housing built before 1960. This data comes from EPA's MiEJScreen and was developed using data from the United States Census Bureau's American Community Survey 5-year estimate for 2015 to 2019. Proximity to RMP sites. This is the proximity to facilities with risk management plans. These are facilities that are required by federal law to file risk management plans. Facilities are obligated to file risk management plans with the EPA if they maintain a quantity of a regulated substance above a certain threshold. This data comes from EPA's MiEJScreen. Finally, the wastewater discharge indicator is the toxicity weighted concentrations in stream segments within an area, which means this indicator gives greater weight to releases of highly toxic chemicals than those that are less toxic. This data also comes from EPA's MiEJScreen. Sensitive population indicators refer to human populations that experience increased vulnerability to environmental health risk factors such as pollution. Such populations include individuals with impaired health conditions due to disease and genetic factors. Pollution is not only a likely contributor to the generation of such conditions, but has also been found to worsen them. For example, exposure to environmental pollutants is both a known risk factor for developing asthma, an indicator within this category, and a known trigger for asthma attacks. All of the data for indicators in this category were prepared by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, except the life expectancy indicator. The asthma indicator measures the rate of emergency department visits for asthma averaged over 2016 to 2019. The cardiovascular disease indicator measures rate of hospitalization for cardiovascular disease averaged over 2016 to 2019. Low birth weight infants measures percent low birth weight averaged over 2014 to 2019. Low birth weight refers to newborns weighing less than 5.5 pounds. The blood lead level indicator is the percent of tested children under age 6 with elevated blood lead levels, which is measured as greater than or equal to 5 micrograms of lead per deciliter of blood. Finally, the life expectancy indicator is the average number of years a person can expect to live, estimated from an average of 2010 to 2015. This data comes from the National Center for Health Statistics. Please note on the tool that individuals with lower life expectancy are scored higher than those with higher life expectancy. So for our last category, socioeconomic factors indicators are conditions that may increase people's stress or make healthy living difficult and cause them to be more sensitive to pollution's effects. The susceptibility of communities of color and low-income populations to various environmental conditions has been reaffirmed many times through research. Studies have found non-white populations to be more likely to live in proximity to air pollution and to experience negative health outcomes associated with exposure. Other socioeconomic factors that represent increased vulnerability have also been included. All of these indicators come from the United States Census Bureau's American Community Survey 5-year estimate 2015 to 2019. Low income population is the percent of population living below 2 times the federal poverty limit. Black, Indigenous, people of color is the sum of all race ethnicity categories except white non-Hispanic. It includes Black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Native, Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, and 2 or more races. Educational attainment is a percent of population over the age of 25 with less than a high school education. Linguistic isolation is the percent limited English-speaking households, which is defined as a household in which all members 14 years and older speak a non-English language and also speak English less than very well. Population under age 5 is percent of the population under age 5, and population over age 64 is the percent of the population over age 64. Unemployment is percent of the population over the age of 16 that is unemployed and eligible for the labor force. It excludes retirees, students, homemakers, and institutionalized persons. Finally, housing burden is the percent of households paying more than 30% of their income on shelter costs. Shelter costs include rent, mortgage principal and interest, insurance, utilities, and taxes. The tool also has additional layers to help put the MiEJScreen layers into context. This isn't an entire list of the context layers, but gives you an idea of the type of information that's included. And John will show you a few of these when he goes through the tool demonstration. The context layers with an asterisk are used in calculating some of the environmental effect indicators. For example, sites of environmental contamination, part 201, were used to calculate the proximity to cleanup sites indicator. We also have additional environmental justice layers, such as the homeowners, loan corporation, neighborhood redlining grade maps. This information is important for understanding how past policies and practices have contributed to current situations. The whole created a neighborhood ranking system known today as redlining. Great Depression, the group was meant to help the general population by expanding home buying opportunities and providing relief from unaffordable mortgages. To determine the loans they would guarantee, they sent appraisers to cities across the nation where they documented information such as type of housing and demographics present there. These reports documented blatantly racist observations that equated non-white residents with quote unquote detrimental influences. The appraisals were then used to generate residential security maps, which banks used to determine eligibility for mortgages. This practice formalized racial housing discrimination, as communities of color were often deemed to be hazardous or declining, areas where banks refused to offer loans. This labeling of non-white neighborhoods as dangerous areas for lending, called redlining, not only produced segregation based on race in American cities, but also contributed to the racial wealth gap. We also have some climate indicators, including urban heat islands and percent tree canopy, as well as other EJ layers such as food deserts and non-attainment areas. We also included several geographic features, such as tribal lands and counties, as well as locations of schools and hospitals. If you're interested in additional information on how to use the tool and more detailed information about the methodology and indicators used in the tool, please refer to these supporting documents. The fact sheet is a short document that provides an overview of MiEJScreen, so it's an easy to use reference. The user guide provides information on how to use the tool and its various functions. So this is where you can go to find information that John's going to be showing you and more detailed instructions on how to use each of the tool's widgets. The draft technical report details the development of MiEJScreen, including purposes and intended uses, limitations of the tool, as well as the data and methods used to develop the tool. As Jennifer mentioned, we're accepting comments on the draft tool and supporting documents through May 16th, 2022. And you can submit a comment in a variety of ways, so please bear with me as I read out this information. I'm not sure if we have people on the phone. Jennifer, do we? If not, I won't.
No, we don't have anybody on the phone right now.
Okay, great. I won't bore you all with reading through all this. Then just know that we are accepting comments submitted in writing through our email box. We also have a voicemail where you can call and leave your message. And we'll be providing an additional opportunities on April 27th. So we will be having informational webinar followed by followed by Q&A, and then an opportunity to provide verbal public comments. Those sessions will be same time as our sessions today, so 1 to 2:30 and 6 to 7:30. So you can find a lot of great information that we've discussed here and on our MiEJScreen landing page. So you can also find information on how to register to attend informational webinar and public comment sessions on April 27th that I mentioned. We'll also be putting the recordings of today's sessions there. We are also having some office hours. Links to attend those are included. Those will be held on April 13th and May 2nd. So this is where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions on how to use the tool and the various functions. And then, of course, on the site, you can access the tool itself and the supporting documents. So the easiest way to get there is to go to michigan.gov/environmental justice and click on the MiEJScreen tab in the right corner. And I'm going to turn things over to John Esch to introduce himself and to begin the tool demonstration. And he'll also show you how to access the tool from the environmental justice site.
Hi, I'm John Esch. I work as a geologist for EGLE Minerals Division. I'll give you a short demonstration of some of the tools and functionality and how to access the application. So this is the main office of Environmental Justice Advocate website. From here, you can go to the MiEJScreen link, which opens this website up. So this is kind of the main page that Katie just mentioned. So this shows our fact sheet, our scoring matrix, our user guide, the technical report. You can also download some of the draft data. We scroll down here. This is where you can actually access the application. We have two versions. We have a executive summary version, which is a single layer version. I'll show you that in just a second, and also the full version, which we'll spend most of our time on. More information on how to provide comments, and also some of those dates that Katie and Jennifer just mentioned as far as when the sessions are and how to attend them. And below here, this is a little bit more information on the model, just to process the scores, subscores, indicators, and categories. At the very bottom are the indicators. So a little more detail on each one of the indicators. And most of the stuff is also in our technical report. So there's multiple ways to get to this information. So if I click on this open executive summary version, this is what it opens up. So this is probably will meet most people's needs. So this is a simplified version. There's many fewer tools or widgets. There's only one layer, it's the overall score. But you can search by an address, pan and zoom. You can change the base map. You can print out a map and find out more information. We'll go into that in more detail. So just for instance, on a broad sense, let me click on this one census tract here in Southwest Clare County. It shows the overall MiEJ score is in the 6th percentile, which is down in this area. And it shows these bolder text. These are the two subscores. So the environmental conditions is the 1st percentile, but population characteristics is actually fairly high. And also the two categories for each one of those. As we scroll down here, you get some demographic information. So there's 1,500 people in this tract. It's 14.8 square miles. There's a population density, median household income, and unemployment rate. This little chart here may be helpful just for looking how things look in one part of the state versus another part of the state. And often you see very big differences in rural areas versus urban areas. So for instance, in this census tract, the exposure category is in the 10th percentile, but the environmental effects is near 1, but actually has fairly high sensitive populations and also socioeconomic categories. But if we compare that, say, with census tract down here in Metro Detroit area, this has a overall EJ score of 84th percentile, pretty high in the environmental conditions, but also fairly high in the population characteristics. So we scroll down here, you can see that all of these categories are high. So just a way to kind of drill down, see data in a little more detail. If you click this little icon, it'll give you a little bit of race and ethnicity of what this track is made out of. So this is the overall MiEJScreen layer. So from here, you can either go to the technical report, which is linked on our website, you can go to the full version, or the main Office of Environmental Justice Advocate. So again, there's many ways to get to the same spot. You can toggle back and forth between the full version and this executive summary version. So I'm going to just go to that version here. And I'm just going to refresh my screen so you see what it would look like if you open up from scratch. When you open it up, there's a large splash screen which gives you some broad information on the purpose of the tool. As you scroll down here, it shows the scoring matrix and also contact information. Now, this may look pretty intimidating, but hopefully, if we do our job well, we can make this look a little bit easier. I'm going to turn off my camera just for the bandwidth purposes. So we have a series of widgets in the upper left here, in the upper right. I may use the term widget, icon, or tool interchangeably, but these allow you to do additional functionality, do additional things. I'm going to quickly go through all these first, and I'm going to go into more detail a little bit later. So this is your typical search widget, just like Google Maps. You search an address, a place, or a census tract, or a county, or eventually a zip code. This is your legend widget. So most of these things you can just toggle on and off. So as you're navigating around here, or use some of these tools that might turn off this widget, for instance, you just toggle it back on again. So any layer that's turned on in the layer list will show up in the legend. Hope that's pretty clear. This widget, this is a bookmark widget. This is basically, it goes to the larger cities in Michigan: Grand Rapids, Lansing, Flint, Kalamazoo, Saginaw Bay City. Just a quick way to navigate to a spot, but also you can create your own bookmark. So say, for instance, you're working on a project, you're working in a county, or working in a certain area, you need to come back to the same area over and over again. You can create your own bookmark. You can also go back to the statewide, either Michigan here, or use the statewide icon. As far as the navigation, there's many ways to navigate. You can use the typical zoom in, zoom out tools. You can use your scroll wheel on your mouse if you have that. You can even draw a box with your mouse. You can also just click on an area and pan if you do a left click on your mouse to pan around the map. The other thing you can do is there's this back arrow button and forward arrow button. And if you're on a smart device or a phone, if you click on this, it'll zoom to your location. If you have your location, your GPS enabled, location enabled to use this tool. So these other widgets, this is a measure tool, allows you to measure distances or areas. You can also use this to calculate or get latitude, longitude for a site. This is the reporting widget. So we're going to show you that in detail towards the end to create a canned report of all the MiEJScreen data in a simplified report. We're also going to show you the side-by-side viewer in just a minute also. Here in the upper left, again, this is the layers list. So this, again, this might look intimidating, but hopefully, don't worry about it, you can't break it. And so what we're showing here is, here's the overall score that Katie talked about. And here's our two subscores. Okay, so here's the environmental conditions subscore, and here's the population characteristics subscore. So each one of these subscores is made of two categories each. So for instance, this environmental conditions subscore is made up of the exposure, which is mostly the air quality indicators, and also the environmental effects indicators. This population characteristics subscore is made up of sensitive populations. Oh, let me turn this off, sorry. Sensitive populations, but also socioeconomic factors. As you can see in different parts of the state, certain of these larger categories are more prevalent. So for instance, socioeconomic factors shows fairly high in Northern Michigan and parts of the UP. So let me quickly show you some examples of some of these indicators. So let's turn on the data air toxic risk. Let me zoom in down here. Again, the more red, the more burden. In the blue, the less burden. So if I click on any of these census tracts, for instance, this is the NADA air toxic cancer risk of 97th percentile. Where this tract here, it's in the 11th percentile. And again, we have the same demographic information and the same race and ethnicity profile for all these pop-ups. Let me zoom out. Let me show you the proximity cleanup sites. So this is mostly state of Michigan internal environmental proximity data sets. So the proximity cleanup sites, let me zoom in here, Southeast Michigan. This is made up of a number of context layers. For instance, you turn on the Superfund NPL sites. You turn on our Part 201 cleanup sites, and also our leaking underground storage tank sites. So this colored map cleanup sites is based on proximity summed for all these different types of sites. So on the sensitive populations category, let me show you life expectancy. So in this example, some of these census tracts in the Detroit area, life expectancy in years is about 75 years, but it's in 71st percentile. If I click on one of these other tracts, life expectancy is percentiles for in the actual years is 84%. We also have, asthma, cardiovascular, and low weight birth infants. On the socioeconomic factors, so here's the overall category, but here's the low income population. Again, some of these socioeconomic factors shows significant elevated percentiles in Northern Michigan. There's the low income population, there's unemployment, people over 64 years old. So the highest in the state are Northeast Florida, Michigan, for over 64. And also Black, Indigenous, people of color population. So just to be clear, these numbers, they're just there to help differentiate that. They don't really have any effect on the score. It's just a way to differentiate these indicators from these indicators. Let me zoom in this area in Southeast Michigan. We turn on the overall score. Let's look at parts of Washtenaw County and parts of Metro Detroit. So here's the overall score. Click on this census tract. So again, this is an 8th percentile for the overall score. Let's scroll down here. You can see it scores actually not very high, but fairly high relative to the sensitive populations in the socioeconomic, but its exposure is 28%, environmental effects is 42%. And here's the race ethnicity profile. And important point that Katie mentioned earlier is that this census tract is essentially the size of a township, where if you look at this square miles, this is like 35 square miles. So one of these smaller census tracts, this area is only 0.4 of a mile because it's based on population. So this census tract is in the 94th percentile overall score. You can see some of the subscores and indicator scores. You see they're all elevated. You can see the race ethnicity profile. Let's look at some of the context layers. Try the overall score again. We'll zoom into the Muskegon area. Let's turn on this layer that Katie mentioned. It's the redlining map. So we're looking at the redlining data from the 30s during the Depression over top of the overall scores. Click on this. So this map's from 1938, and this neighborhood was rated category D. If you have time, maybe click on the original maps. You can also click on some of the forums. There's lots of information here on this redlining data. For example, here's the original map from 38. Let me zoom out to get an extent on what cities have this. So only the larger cities in Michigan had this done. And unfortunately, the form data isn't available for Lansing or Jackson. Some of the other context layers may be of interest. So again, these are additional environmental justice context layers. For instance, let me turn on the TRI data. And let's use the search function. Let's go to Bay City. Bay City, Michigan. So here's the TRI data. Here's the discharge data, the air pollution information, the brownfields. These are all sites reporting to the EPA. Let's go back here. Let's turn on our environmental conditions subscore or a public subscore. So what we can do with this is this little widget here. This is the base map gallery. So the person can change the base map from this light gray to an aerial photo, or topographic, or street map. Or maybe in your case, you're interested in what are the other communities, maybe not necessarily potential contamination sources, but where are the churches and the hospitals, public housing buildings, the schools, daycares. Well, actually, we don't have daycares, the schools, school districts. So for instance, you can produce a map and then use the print icon, to create a map and get a name and save it as a PDF. So let me turn off some of these context layers. One thing I should probably point out is these context layers also, they have attributes for them. So you can click on them, see information. Often you've got links to an EPA website where the data is stored and managed. Let me change the background map back to the grayscale. Let's zoom to the full extent of Michigan. This glossary, this is showing all the indicators, sub-indicators, scores, sub-scores, and also some of the context layers. Just some more information, kind of a shorter description, but also in some cases, the sources for that information, where it comes from. I already showed you the print widget. This layer here allows you to add external data. So let's say you're working on a project, you work for a county or city, or you work for a consulting company, or you work for an EJ advocacy group, and you have your own data. You have your own data, you want to see how it relates with this MiEJScreen. So for instance, I have a data set of percentage of people without health insurance. So this is a ArcGIS web service. And I would know this in advance. I'm going to add this web service. And go back to the layer list. So if you ever see one of these layers, it's grayed out, that means it's scale dependent. That means you need to zoom in closer to see it. So this is the American Community Survey data from the Census Bureau, showing percentage of the population without any health insurance. So what you can do with this, with these, any of the layer lists, you can actually change the transparency. And also you can see the legend right within the layer list. So let's change this transparency. Make it totally transparent. So now we're seeing the population characteristics below. We're going to slide this over to see the percentage of people without health insurance above. So it's a way to just to see two different layers. There's another way to do this, and I'll show you in a minute with using the side-by-side viewer. Another way, GIS shapefiles are a really common file format. So I'm going to go back to my add data. So I have a zipped up shapefile under file. See, these are the file types you can have: a shapefile, CSV, KML, GPX, and GeoJSON. So drag this, put it right on top. Or I can also browse to it. What this data set is, this is households where they're paying over 5% for the energy burden. Over 5% of the income is for energy, for home heating. And so there's many data sets out there from the Census Bureau, from EPA, also from the ESRI's Living Atlas of the World, or you may have your own local data. Go back here, turn these two layers off. So show you this filter widget next. So right now we're working at population characteristics subscore. So any of these MiEJScreen layers, you can actually filter. So let's go to the subscore here. I want to see everything above the 65th percentile. Let's go to the overall score. Filter that one for the 60th percentile, for instance. So it's a nice way to just see where the elevated areas are. Sorry about that. This widget here, this is a sharing widget. So let's say you do some analysis, you're turning layers on and off, you're do some review of the data. Let's go down here, say to the thumb area. You have one of these other layers turned on. Let's say traffic density, for instance. You can use the sharing tool. You click this on email, it'll save a link. You can forward to a colleague with a link to this, and all the layers you have turned on, the zoom extent, they will see in the email link. You can also share this link as a in social media. A couple more widgets real quickly here. This is the About widget. This just gives you some more information, some of the hyperlinks on where to find additional information. And this widget here, this is the how to use the map widget. So we already went through all these widgets, but maybe you forget, you just want to know how to do certain things. And this is kind of a watered down version of our user guide. So this user guide, you can go through, get more detailed information on how to use certain tools step by step. So let's go over here and look at some of these more advanced tools. Let's look at the side-by-side viewer. So any of the layers in the context layers list or the overall EJ list, you can see side by side. By default, it uses the overall score. So I'm going to zoom in, say to Southern Michigan. I'm going to change this layer over here from the overall score. And I want to see urban heat islands, for instance, which is a really nice proxy for climate change, environmental justice concerns. I want to see tree canopy percent. I want to see impervious surfaces. So as I zoom in or pan anywhere in the state, these the geography stays the same. So the pop-up works the same here as it does on the main screen. Another probably useful tool is this reporting widget. So it allows you to create a canned report for a point, line, or polygon. So let's say, for instance, you're working on a site, a project in the Lansing area, and the address is 525 West Allegan Street. And I'm gonna select this address. You'll see why I did it in a minute. And I want to copy this. I'm gonna do a 1.5 mile buffer. You can select whatever buffer distance you want. I'm gonna zoom in here. I want to create a report. So there's 19 census tracts that intersect this 1.5 mile buffer of this facility I'm interested in. You can expand this and look at all the other indicators and all the other attributes. Or a useful thing to do is click the print icon, click print. I'm going to paste that address up here. Type in 1.5 buffer. So this is that canned report I was telling you about. Produce a nice professional looking report with a map showing census tracts, the overall score. So this is showing for those 19 census tracts, the overall score, the two sub scores, total population, some of the demographic information. But also it's showing you the actual categories in all the indicator percentiles. So you can click print here and save it as a PDF to your local computer. So that was a quick whirlwind overview of some of the functionality and some of the data sets with the MiEJScreen.
Well, thanks, John. Yeah, no,
Jennifer, for questions.
You're good. No, that was great. Thanks to both you and Katie for that overview. I know it was a lot of information for folks to kind of take in, especially if you haven't had a chance to get in there and sort of dig around. I think hopefully John gave you some good starting points, places to go. I know I like to put my own home address in, kind of see what was around me because I know what's there physically. So it helped me kind of get a perspective of how does this tool actually work? What sort of functionality does it have? And I know I've only broke the surface with it. So we don't have any questions from folks as of right now, but you guys definitely have plenty of time. See, I said that, and then of course we got some. So this is a good question. You had talked about some of the indices for climate change, and one of the ones that you had mentioned, John, was the tree canopy data. Can you remember off the top of your head where that data source came from for the tree canopy?
Yeah, it's the National Land Cover Data Set. I'll turn that on real quick. Yeah, it's this here.
This one is interesting to me because for whatever reason, because it's trees, I expected it to be shades of green, and because it's not, it's disconcerting to me. I don't know why, but I want it to be like shades of green, less green, more green. So
this comes from the National Land Cover Data Set from 2016. This is based on a 30-meter grid nationwide.
All right. And like I said, if you guys would like to raise your hand and ask a question out loud, we're obviously fine with doing that as well. I don't want to cut it off too short if people have questions. So give just another minute here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again and go over a couple other things while you guys think of some questions. Oh, all right, there we did have a follow-up on that canopy study. Do you know off the top of your head if it was a leaf on or leaf off study, John? I don't know if we might have to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't. if you do a Google search for NLCD, there's a national database with multiple years. It's really a land cover database, and you can filter for tree canopy, and also kind of sister layer is impervious surfaces.
All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over a couple other things. We can always come back to John if you guys have other questions. Oops, I'm sorry, I think I shared the wrong one here. So let me stop sharing, because I know we already saw that, didn't we, Katie? That was yours. Okay. All right. Okay, so you guys already met us. So this is our panel, obviously. And let me go back here. Okay, so I want to go over those ways that you can submit comment again, because I think this is going to be really important. We will take comments by mail. So if you have extra things that you want to supply to us, or things that you think we need to know about what you're commenting on, definitely feel free to either send those via US Post, or you can email those to eagle-environmentaljustice@michigan.gov. And we did just open a voicemail. So if folks feel more comfortable calling and kind of letting us know a short comment or a longer comment, you can call the voicemail at 517-284-1400. And again, we will be having our next information session and a public comment opportunity on April 27th. So if you want to comment verbally there, you can definitely do that as well. So I always just want to say, you don't have to come and do your comment live. We're happy to accept them in any other way. So I want to make sure folks are very clear on that. So this is a good question about the data sets. So I know when you go to the glossary, you can see some of the data sets and things like that as far as where they came from. But the question was, are there footnotes or anything else similar to that in the tool that have the sources of each of the data sets? So I know that's in the technical document. We kind of get into that pretty thoroughly. I don't know if there's anything in the tool where you can just click on it and it can show you things like that.
Well, for all of these, for all the MiEJScreen layers, there isn't any references within the tool itself, but a number of the context layers, there is some links. For instance, we showed you the urban heat islands, and so this is based on a recent journal article. And so we have a reference in the journal article itself, for instance, right here. And so the same. So
John, go if you want to share your screen again, because we're not seeing it, but feel free to share over me, because I want people to see how the tool looks. I think that's really important.
Sorry about that.
While John's doing that, I'll mention too that in the technical report, if you don't want to get too far in the weeds, at the beginning of each section that describes the indicators in each category, there is just a quick reference table that talks about the indicator, what it's measuring, and where that information comes from, the source of it.
So what I was showing is, for some of these, if there's a very specific journal article, for instance, the urban heat islands, let me zoom in here. We have the reference right here at the bottom of the pop-up. You click on it and download the document, but also the same information is also in the glossary.
I know one of the comments we had gotten earlier today, which I think is a really good one, and I don't know if we can do it or not, but someone asked, can we have a search function in the glossary? Because the glossary is kind of long, so that would be awesome if we could do that. I don't know if we can or not, but I thought that
was show you live
too.
We'll show you live. So, so you're right. The glossary is pretty intimidating. So we're going to go up here to Google ellipsis and go find. I'm going to type CEJST. So you can use the Google search function, and any dialogue you have open, it'll go right to it.
See, learn something new every day. I wasn't sure if it would do that on the dialog box in GIS like that or not. So that's good to know. We'll have to respond back to that other person for sure.
And it also works in the context layers also.
We did respond back to him, by the way. He emailed our
Oh, did he?
EJ
Okay.
box. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, good. See, it's working. People are asking questions and I love that. So this is a great question for you, Katie. So this is one we didn't get asked earlier, which I was kind of surprised, and we didn't really talk about it either. But so after the 60-day public comment period ends on May 16th, then what happens? Is this, I think there's a fear that it just will get lost in a tumble of changes and things like that. But, what's the plan there?
Yeah, so I mean, after the comment period closes, we're going to review all the comments that we get and eventually put out a final tool, but it's not necessarily a final tool, as we'll continue to take input from folks that are using the tool and consider other data sets and all of that. So we're planning on probably updating the tool every 3 to 4 years, but always feel free to share additional information outside the comment period. And I know the second part of that question was, when can you start using it? And the answer to that is anytime. It's out there now, so please, yeah, take advantage of it. You don't need to wait until the final version to start using it and exploring it. In fact, we encourage you to do that so that you can provide comments.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that it doesn't necessarily need to be like officially released for you to use the data that's in there. These data sets are pretty well thought out. They're very well explored. They've been QA, QC to the extent possible. So definitely don't feel like you might be missing something or something's wrong. That being said, you notice something's wrong, something that we missed, definitely let us know. I think it's also a good point. And we were talking about this earlier today, is like, we know a lot of data sets. I teased John that he's very mappy. I'm very mappy. I love these mappy things, but we don't know everything that's out there. And you might be aware of something that could be really helpful or useful, that you could either integrate on your own, like John showed, or let us know about it. And it might be something that we might want to consider on a further update or something like that. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to Katie at any time, and let her know that you have an idea. So she loves that.
Yeah, and another thing that was brought up in the previous session, which I think is important too, is we obviously haven't got on the ground and verified every single data point and all the data that's included in this. So there are some limitations with the data. So if you know that something's really glaring and wrong, please let us know that too, so that we can look further into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in this, I got another question for you, John. I think I want you to share your screen so you can show this data layer. One of the things that we added was the county lines. So this question was, can you only search for data by census tract, or is there a way to look at it by county? So, and can you pick a county or pick a tract based on the county? So you have the county lines up here now. So zooming in, is there a way to just select like those tracts in that county, or how do you suggest people do that?
So the data, the data is statewide. So all the data is statewide. And so we don't have a selection tool, but there is a selection tool available, selection widget available to select. So basically you could select, could be just Mount Pleasant area, or just, Big Rapids and a couple tracks. And then we don't have a way to just download that data.
John, with the reporting tool, could you draw a polygon around a county, and then you would be able to bring up those census tracts within it?
So let's choose a simple county, say Clare County.
Yeah, pick a square one.
Yeah.
See if it will work. But that's exactly what I was thinking too. I think that's a really good question.
It's going to get a bit of the it's going to get a little bit of the neighboring. Let's choose the defaults. So there's 23 census tracts. Obviously, it's going to get some of the surrounding ones.
John, when you use that search bar too, I know that you can search like by city, but does that also allow you, when you have like the full map view, to go to a specific county?
We don't have this set up for county, but that doesn't mean that we could set that up. Right now, it's just set up for place, address, or tract. Let's try Gladwin County. Gladwin County, Michigan. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that totally answered that person's question, but
I think that's helpful. I mean, this goes to how does this tool function? I think even though you're the developer of the tool, there's still things in here that we're picking apart. So it's, this is why we're having these conversations, is exactly to explore these kinds of situations and see what else is out there.
And also the county lines are one of the context layers. So if you wanted to like turn off the other stuff and clearly see the county outlines, you could do that, correct, John?
yes, yeah.
It might just be perfecting your drawing technique as far as that goes. So, oh, that's really good. Good questions for sure.
So this is with county lines turned off.
Yep, that might make it easier to do the polygon as well. So, all right. And so another question came in, how is this tool going to compare to EPA's MiEJScreen as far as some differences and maybe some commonalities? I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit, Katie, that would be helpful.
Sure, I can talk about that. So EPA's EGLE just recently came out with a 2.0 version, so it has included some additional information there. But we have taken all the environmental and demographic indicators that are included in MiEJScreen. Those are also included in our list of indicators to provide some consistency across the tools. But the main difference is that EPA's EGLE, they do produce environmental justice indices, but they're based on one environmental indicator with a combination of the demographic information. So they don't take all of their indicators and produce an overall score like we're doing with MiEJScreen. I think another great benefit of developing a Michigan specific tool is that we can obviously include information that's specific to Michigan that EPA may not have access to. For instance, the layers like the proximity to cleanup sites, those are all, not all of them, there is the Superfund sites, but a lot of those proximity indicators are based on sites that we regulate through EGLE, as well as the health data that we have from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So we have a lot more data at the statewide scale that we can use that EPA doesn't necessarily have. So here, John's showing the environmental justice indices. So you can see, for each of those environmental indicators, oh no, he's showing pollution and sources. So those are the environmental indicators that they use to develop the environmental justice indices. So they're a little bit different.
So, but I think the important point I think in developing this tool is, since before this MiEJScreen came about, most people in Michigan were using this tool. So we tried to duplicate as much of the data and functionality so it wouldn't be such a shock to people. But essentially all these layers under the pollution sources we're using already. Also under socioeconomic, we're also using all these same layers. With the idea of people who are used to using this, to seeing it in a Michigan context, if that helps.
Yeah, and some of the tools that we've included, like the reporting tool and the side-by-side viewer, are also on EGLE. So when we were looking and reviewing other state tools and EPA's EGLE we were trying to get the best of the tools that are out there and provide the most useful information that we could for our Michigan screening tool.
Yeah, so I said earlier, I feel like our version is kind of the amped up version. It's like the more sparkly version because it has more things. I really like that it gives, the overall score, which is something that EPA's MiEJScreen doesn't do. So it's a different kind of a snapshot. One of the things that is going to be really important for users, especially as you all start digging into the tool and looking at things, is asking yourselves, what could this be used for? Katie mentioned this earlier, that this tool is meant for all different kinds of stakeholders, not just EGLE, not just, environmental advocates, not just industry. It's for anybody who thinks they might have a use for it. So we're also hoping that folks, as they go through this, they let us know through the comment period, like, hey, this is something I think this could be used for. We're already talking about this with some of our other state agencies. And so this is a really interesting tool that they can use to do some of the things that Katie was mentioning earlier. So
yeah, even outside of the comment period, we'd love to, as this tool is out there and people are using it for different purposes, we'd love to hear back through our EGLE EJ box, kind of what it's being used for, the different projects it's being used for. I think it's exciting to see, what uses it has and, who's using it.
Yeah.
So even outside the comment period, I encourage folks to let us know how you're using it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read this one because it goes right to that, just to hopefully this can spark some other folks too. So what comment was about community action agencies who administer the weatherization assistance program. So they serve specific counties and sometimes even more than one county. And this tool could be a great to target certain areas that have high energy burden, for example, when they're doing marketing or outreach. So yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about being able to use this for. We don't think that, giving everybody a checklist or a list of things that you should use it for is necessarily the best way to use the tool. It's a screening tool. That's, we're hoping that people will be innovative with it and it will cause to spark for other, suggestions and things like that. So thank you so much for putting that in to the question box. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and to just further discuss that was, we do have a lot of, in our EJ layer list, it looks kind of overwhelming when you first look at it, but we definitely wanted to include all that information because depending on what you're using the tool for, you may only be looking at, certain indicators. Say you're going to use 3 of the indicators and you're not so much worried about the overall score. So, we wanted it to have as much function for as many people as possible.
So this is the housing burden. It's not specifically energy. I think energy is one of the components, but maybe this would be useful for the person on the chat. And I showed earlier the energy burden layer that you could add to it.
Oh, this was really good. So I'm just kind of watching the question box. I want to go over just one other thing before we check out today. Maybe we'll let you guys get off a little bit early. We always say that in meetings during regular work days. And sometimes I think, yes, that would be awesome. So maybe you guys will think that too. I know we appreciate you joining in the evening. We never know when it's going to be best for people. So we want to just offer, multiple opportunities for you to come chat with us. So if you're going to plan on attending one of the other webinars where we're going to have that public comment opportunity on April 27th, it might be best to register for that one. You totally don't have to. You can just click on the link at the time of the meeting if you want. But if you do it now, then it just puts it on your calendar. For me, I find that works best. But if you're going to attend the office hours, that is one of those things where you're just going to come click in on it on either the 13th or the 2nd, whenever you want, or both. And that's going to run from 12 to 1. So kind of over lunchtime. And we really want to focus that on some of the things like we talked about tonight, like how do you do this? How do I look at this? I'm trying to get this functionality, it's not quite working, those kinds of things. So office hours are going to be more for how to. The informational webinar and the public comment session is going to be a little bit more like tonight. I think we're going to work on kind of revamping some stuff a little bit, but we want to definitely go over some of the background information again for folks who didn't get it the first time. And then of course, accessing any of the tools or supporting information that we talked about tonight is just at that michigan.gov /environmental justice webpage, and then you can find links to all of those kinds of things as well. If you need to get a hold of us or you want to just leave Katie a note either outside the public comment period or whatever, you can email us at EGLE-environmentaljustice@michigan.gov or give a call at 517-249-0906. And that being said, I think that's all I have for you today. I want to see, there's just one other question here. We'll just do one other question and then I will let you guys go. And if you want to sign off, you know, now we've pretty much covered everything besides thank you so much for joining us. And but we'll go over this one last question and then we'll let everybody else go if they want to. So the question is about Michigan watersheds. Is there any watershed information, any watershed layers? I know you guys didn't mention those, but I didn't know if they were ones that we just weren't highlighting tonight. So are there any other water quality indicators in any of the layers that are in the tool so far?
So in our indicators, we do have the proximity to impaired water bodies. So that's any water body in the state that's listed as impaired through the Federal Clean Water Act. John, is there additional context layers that might get at a little bit at that? Oh, another one too is the wastewater discharge indicator. So that's looking specifically at wastewater discharge, but you know, it's obviously related to water quality.
We could add we did have a watersheds layer last year. We could add a watersheds layer just
to the context layers.
Yeah, so that would be a great comment. So send that in, not that we're not, we're kind of keeping track of all of these, but that would be a great like official comment to put in if that was something that you wanted to see in there. Then we can.
And I would assume there's probably a layer that you could add that has that, but I think that'd probably be pretty easy for us to add in the geographic features in the context layer.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. For those of you who stuck around, we greatly appreciate you. We will be, like I said, posting the videos up online soon. And since you joined us tonight, I'll send you an email and let you know when those are posted in case you're interested in checking out the question and answer from earlier today if you missed it, or if you wanted to watch along with this one again or kind of refresh your memory on how to walk through some of the things. So with that being said, I'm going to let you go. I hope you have a really great rest of your night. I know it's kind of cold out, but I promise it's going to be warming up soon. Not a weather person, but maybe after tonight, because I know it's going to be horrible weather tonight. But besides that, have a great rest of your day and take care, everybody. Thanks so much.